The opening scene of UF the Candidatee introduces its political backdrop with the kind of glossy campaign rhetoric audiences expect from a presidential race. Yet beneath the surface, it's quietly setting up a story about authenticity and truth, both public and deeply personal. Senator Jen Hanlon's speech presents her as the embodiment of progress, a woman whose career and compassion are intertwined, invoking real change through lived experience. Her opponent, Senator Trip Mathis, represents the opposite, a man of privilege and cynicism whose rhetoric masks prejudice and moral decay. That contrast is made chillingly clear when, after his campaign ad, he casually exposes racist and homophobic beliefs, an unsettling reminder that the people shaping the world's policies often harbor private biases. But it's in the small, seemingly unrelated domestic scene that follows, between his daughter Penny and her girlfriend Casey, that the film begins to reveal its emotional heart. The political suddenly becomes personal. Penny's guarded tone when she tells her father she's hanging out with Casey carries the weight of someone who has spent her life monitoring her words, protecting a secret she knows would not be welcome. Once Trip exits, the shift in energy is immediate, the two girls can breathe again. Casey's quiet remark, "I think your dad knows," lands with the heaviness of fear that queer audiences will instantly recognize, that sinking feeling of being seen by someone whose gaze is judgment, not acceptance. Penny's response, a mix of denial and exhaustion, reflects the internal conflict of queer youth who love deeply but live under the shadow of rejection. The tenderness between them, soft and unscripted, stands in stark contrast to the cruelty of the political world Penny's father inhabits, symbolizing the difference between the sincerity of love and the hypocrisy of power. When Casey reminds Penny that being open isn't just about them, but about living truthfully, it becomes the emotional thesis of the film. That honesty, whether in politics or in love, comes at a cost, but it's the only way forward. For queer women watching, this moment is painfully real. The quiet courage of existing fully in a world that still makes you justify it. Scene 2 of I'll Youth a Candidate brings the film's emotional core into focus, shifting from politics to vulnerability, from the public performance of power to the private cost of love lived in silence. Senator Jen Hanlon, fresh off a nationally praised interview that frames her as heroic and selfless, walks into the company of the one person who knows her beyond the cameras, Supreme Court Justice Beth Pellegrino, her longtime partner and confidant. What begins as light teasing and admiration quickly deepens into a portrait of two women who have built their lives, careers, and love on the precarious foundation of secrecy. Their intimacy is lived in whispers and glances, gestures of closeness that carry the weight of what they cannot show the world. Jen's reluctance to come out, even as a Democratic nominee known for her progressive record, underscores the painful truth that women in power, particularly queer women, are still measured against unfair expectations. To be strong, but not threatening, likable, but not too different. Beth, meanwhile, represents the silent endurance that so many queer partners have lived through, the one who cheers from the sidelines, who sacrifices her own openness for the sake of the other's safety or success. Their conversation about the LGBTQ+ convention is tender but charged. It's not simply about whether to come out, but about what it means to live truthfully when the world's gaze can so easily distort your worth. For queer women watching, this moment feels heartbreakingly familiar. The tension between love and legacy, visibility and survival. Jen's fear is not cowardice but realism, a reflection of how even in modern times public women, especially those who love other women, are forced to choose between authenticity and acceptance. Yet Beth's quiet insistence that we've been silent long enough becomes an act of courage, a mirror for so many who've had to hide in plain sight. This scene doesn't just humanize its protagonists. It indicts the society that demands their silence, reminding us that love, no matter how forbidden or invisible, remains the truest act of resistance. In this scene, the candidate pivots from personal tenderness to public crucifixion, revealing how the world reacts when a woman's past, especially one tied to her sexuality, becomes political ammunition. What begins as a smear campaign orchestrated by a rival senator exposes not just the brutality of politics, but the deeper cultural fear of women who live authentically, especially queer women who exist outside the rules of respectability. The leaked videotape is weaponized not for what it contains, but for what it represents. A woman once young, carefree, and intimate with another woman, now punished for having dared to live without shame. When Senator Hanlon stands before the cameras and refuses to apologize, her composure becomes a radical act of self-possession. She flips the moral gaze, calling out the hypocrisy of a society that tolerates war, hunger, and corruption, yet still shames women for their autonomy and pleasure. The scene resonates with queer audiences because it mirrors the way so many LGBTQ+ people, especially women, have been forced to defend not their actions but their existence. The courage in Hanlon's voice carries the quiet heartbreak of generations who have been made to feel like their love is scandalous, their past's liabilities. For queer women, there's an almost collective ache in watching her restraint, her insistence that consent and dignity are not up for debate. It's not about the tape, it's about what it means to have one's private self dissected by a public that still cannot separate a woman's body from her worth. Meanwhile, the rival senator's sneering comments embody the patriarchal entitlement that defines so much of political culture, where men's transgressions are dismissed as boys being boys, but a woman's youth becomes a permanent mark against her. Beth's quiet support at the end reminds viewers that love still survives amid the fallout, that tenderness between women persists even when the world tries to burn it. This moment captures how queer women's truths are so often distorted through the lens of scandal. Yet Hanlon's calm defiance becomes something sacred, a reminder that owning one's story, no matter how the world twists it, is the ultimate act of power and self-love. In the final act of Eartha Candidate, everything that the story has been building toward comes full circle, not through scandal or power plays, but through empathy, integrity, and the quiet strength of queer womanhood. The meeting between Senator Jen Hanlon and Amelia Mathis is a moment of deep humanity, one that transcends politics. Here we see two women from opposite sides of the political battlefield, one a seasoned public figure carrying the scars of being shamed for her past, the other a young woman struggling to reconcile her identity with her father's ideology. Their conversation is tender, disarming, and profoundly queer, not because of romance but because of the shared vulnerability that defines queer connection. That recognition of self in another person's struggle. Jen's calm reassurance to Amelia, her refusal to speak ill of her father despite everything he's done, and her quiet insistence on compassion over resentment reveal the emotional intelligence that has carried her through every attack. When Amelia dies shortly after, the tragedy lands like a gut punch, not just because of the loss of innocence, but because it reminds queer viewers of the countless young lives suffocated by fear, secrecy, and hate. The revelation that she was murdered by the very man tasked with protecting her father's image underscores how systemic that violence can be, that queer bodies and voices are still treated as collateral in the pursuit of control. And yet, when Hanlon stands as president at the film's close and openly acknowledges Beth as her life partner, the moment radiates something revolutionary: peace. Her words are not framed as defiance but as belonging. She doesn't apologize or posture, she simply exists as both woman and leader, lover and public servant. To queer audiences, that act of visibility feels like oxygen, the fulfillment of what Amelia never got to live to see. Jen's acknowledgement of her journey, from a poor girl from Fresno questioning her identity to president, transforms personal struggle into collective triumph. The film's final grace note, her public declaration of love, isn't just about representation, it's about reclamation, of self, of truth, and of every queer woman who's ever had to hide in plain sight.